Everyone deserves equal economic, political, social rights and opportunities. Social works is to open the doors of access and opportunity for everyone, particularly those in the greatest need.
Before we start our event, we would like to give in a few instructions. First, avoid sending unwanted comments during the webinar. Second, a special time will be given to you to ask your questions to the speaker. All the questions should be posted in the comment box. Third, it's mandatory to fill the feedback form, which will be posted in the comment section few minutes before the session ends, and it's open only for 15 minutes. So make sure everyone fills it on time. E-certificates will be provided only for those who have filled the feedback form.
Now, I would like to hand over the platform to Paushali Saho, the Cultural Secretary of JNC NSS Unit, to introduce our dear speaker and to deliver the welcome speech.
Good evening, all, and a hearty welcome to today's webinar on social justice, organized by NSS Unit 2 of St. Joseph's College in collaboration with Jyoti Nivas. I am thankful to all of you who have joined us in this session today. I, on behalf of the entire organizing team, would like to cordially welcome our honorary chief guest of the day, Dr. Jayakumar Krishan. We are certainly grateful to him for gladly accepting our invitation. Dr. Jayakumar Krishan is an eminent social worker who has served diligently towards uplifting the values of our society. He had served in World Vision India until 2015 and was the CEO of the organization for more than 11 years. He has also played a vital role as a leader in World Vision International for Faith and Development until 2017. Apart from being a social worker and public figure, he is also a published writer. He has authored the book God of the Empty Handed and has written several articles on poverty, power, governance, integrity, and leadership. Dr. Jayakumar has received his Masters in Social Work from Madras School of Social Work, Chennai. He has also had a Masters in Missiology and PhD in Intercultural Studies from Fuller School of World Mission, California. We are immensely pleased to have such a generous and intellectual personality amidst us. It's my privilege, sir, to greet you a warm welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Vaishali, for that great start. Now, I would like to hand over the platform to our speaker of the day, Mr. Jayakumar Christian.
Hey, Karthi, sorry. I want to thank you. Yes, I just realized. I want to thank you for this opportunity to join each of you this afternoon to talk about this issue of social justice. I was mentioning this is not exactly a pleasant topic to talk about, uh, and it's often a conversation that is mixed, has always evoked mixed reactions. But I want to congratulate you for taking this topic head on. And I want to thank the leadership of the NSS of both colleges for inviting me to join you. In the next few minutes, I want to address this question and I bring a particular assumption to this conversation. Uh, as people, as young people, you have a huge advantage. And as ones who have opted to sign in for NSS, I am reading, or my assumption is that you intend to change the society rather than simply drift during your student life. I'm assuming that you are young people who intend to make a difference to your society. So I speak to a group who are saying that you intend to provide leadership. The question I want to bring to our conversation is, how do we provide leadership for an issue such as social justice, that is an uncomfortable topic and which will invariably evoke mixed reactions? There will be winners and losers in this conversation. Rarely in a conversation on social justice do all of us win. So this is a win-lose conversation. And for you to so boldly sign up and say that you as an organization, as NSS of these two colleges, saying that we want to talk about the issues of social justice, not just simply to tick off a program menu and say we have discussed uh, issues of social justice among the other topics that you have discussed over the last few months. I'm assuming that you intend to transform our society. And when we say our society, for you and me, the society has a name. It's called India. It has got flesh and blood. It's not just simply statistic. We're talking about 1.3 billion people for whom this is their home. And I want to offer you a few thoughts on the issue of social justice. And before I do that, I want to share with you my slide on for this evening for you to follow this conversation. Okay, Karthi, just confirm when you're able to see my slide. You can. Okay, good. So, and I want to, like I said, talk about not just simply social justice, but dig one step deeper and ask the question, what does it mean to provide leadership for issues of social justice? And I had requested Sharon and Karthi to share a video titled Kalapani. And I'm assuming you would have seen this video. It's only 20 minutes. It's a pretty brief, straightforward video. I want to ask you at the beginning of our conversation, what did you see as expressions of injustice in this video? If you could put it in your chat box, the moderator could pick it up and maybe read it for us, for the group. I'll wait for your comments. What did you see were the various expressions of injustice in that video? Go ahead. You can type your responses in the chat box. What disturbed you? What evoked anger in you as you watched that video? Your thoughts, your comments? Go ahead. Okay, let me just offer you some thoughts as you probably look at that video once more, hopefully. These are people who also call themselves Indians, who also have the same color of blood that flows through their vein, like the color of the blood that flows through our veins. And unfortunately, just because of the place of birth or the gender, none of this, they had a choice. they become instruments or become recipients of violence, recipients of oppression. And I would urge you to go back and look at that video. Unless we have a face for injustice, injustice simply becomes a concept to talk about, far removed from my reality. If there is no tug in my heart when I consider issues of social injustice, there is no way that I would respond or leave alone being a leader on issues of social injustice. The recent COVID experience globally has redefined in many ways issues of justice. For example, it has increased the number of poor and minorities in many nations. What we thought earlier were important progresses, suddenly there has been a reversal in the number of poor and minorities in our nations. There has been exponential growth of the most vulnerable poor in all our nations. And in some nations like India, we are compounded by the population we have. We have huge numbers of poor people who have now become the new poor in the margins. There were cracks in the safety net. What we thought was well designed, well crafted welfare measures suddenly had cracks in them. We also found that our democratic institutions came through as shallow, could not handle this crisis. Nay, our judiciary system went on holiday. We had our many other institutions across our nation simply could not handle the issues of COVID or the impact of COVID. We didn't even know, did not even have statistic on how many migrants we have in our nation, migrant laborers. Our education system, suddenly we have new people, new students who have been excluded from our education system. Our mobile shops in many of our cities were crowded for the poor families looking for cheap mobile phones so that the children can continue to attend classes. A classic picture I saw in one of our major newspapers in this part of our country were boys and girls who had climbed up a tree with a mobile phone in their hands, hoping to get a good network so that they can watch their classes, online classes. Earlier, it was told our education system started under the tree. Our children learned sitting under the tree, but we have reached a stage where our children are on top of the trees, trying to catch a network so they can just simply be part of the online classes. Suddenly, many of our students are not as privileged as you and I are, that they will have to um, find new ways of being part of the education system. There is a widening power gap between those with power and those who do not have power. We call them powerless. There is a redefinition of the mainstream. Unfortunately, this redefinition is being done by those who are powerful. They are defining the new normal for us. And there is an emerging authoritarianism in many of our nations. For some reason, crisis becomes a great opportunity for those in power to establish their authority. So I want to offer you 5 leadership traits. And in the next few minutes, I want to offer these 5 traits as something that you want to consider as you build yourself as young leaders of a 1.3 billion nation. The first trait: for addressing issues of social justice, as leaders, you need to become comfortable to function in the midst of chaos. World, except for in the exam system, where there is only one right answer and the rest are wrong answers, in life, there are shades of right. There is ambiguity. Only young people who can function in the context of ambiguity will flourish. When I use the word flourish, it is not someone who can manipulate things for their own self gain. I'm talking about having a bunch of leaders who can say, I will provide leadership even if it does not fall within exactly a black and white situation, even if it is gray. You need to be able to lead from the front. The situation being dynamic, it's fluid, and very strangely, because of COVID, what we thought were patterns and trends and predictive science suddenly has collapsed. Major management schools are unable to predict anything these days because COVID seems to have simply washed away our archival memory. And leaders are leaders who can function in the midst of ambiguity. We are going through a season where there are multiple variables. In social justice, you don't know which caused the issue of injustice. You are dealing with multiple variables, some strong, some weak, some direct, many indirect, but you're dealing with multiple variables. And many of the variables that cause the issue of social justice are very strangely outside the ambit of your control. A leader is a leader who can say, even if it is not clear, I will lead from the front. The world very rarely offers you a clear roadmap to become a leader in issues of social justice. First trait, to be able to flourish in the midst of chaos. The second trait I would like to suggest is a leader inspires with passion. It's not about projects. It's not, I want to caution you, young people, don't fall for fancy projects or the flavor of the month projects. If you are wanting to make a difference on issues of injustice, oppression, marginalization, you must lead with passion. Passion is contagious. Activities rarely contagious. They will keep you busy. They might give you a certificate, but at the end of the day, nothing changes. If you want to intend to change the life of 1.3 billion people, you need to know how to lead with passion. A passion for me very simply means what tugs your heart, what keeps you awake in the night. When you wake up in the morning, what are you able to say? For this purpose, I'm waking up to a new day. And very strangely, passion demands investment of life. Passion is not just simply a bundle of competencies, it requires my whole life. It is not simply about choosing, making careers, etc. All those are important. But your career simply becomes a platform to express your passion. That is the kind of people who make a difference in our nation, not the ones who simply drift from one career to another career. Does not happen. But those who drive through life with passion. Passion, and this is another occupational hazard I must caution you, for you as young people. Passion and transformation are a double-edged sword. When you lead with passion, very strangely, it will turn around and demand that I transform myself. I cannot preach to you social justice and pick up insights from a video called Kalapani and ill-treat my wife. Simply not possible. I cannot say I lead with passion on issues of social justice and do not train and nurture my children on issues of justice to be sensitive to issues of justice. That's the risk of dealing with issues of passion. For those of you who don't want to transform yourself, this just might be a good time to simply drop off. Because social justice demands passion, and passion demands integrity. And that integrity requires that my own life also gets transformed in the process. When our life, there is no integrity, our passion simply becomes empty noise. And the first ones who will be able to say, this is just simply empty noise, are those who are victims of injustice. They will say, no, ma, this is just a project activity for this college. They will not respond to you. And once you turn your back, they will go back to square one. So if you want to make a difference to issues of social injustice, the second area you want to pay attention to and invest yourself is to inspire yourself with passion. The third trait, your asset is important, your bias is very important. Most of us go through life where people, teachers and parents and others would say, No, no, you should not have a bias. You should not have a bias in favor of this, against this, that is not good. Maintain neutrality. But when it comes to issues of injustice, bias is an asset. I want to ask yourself, maybe after this conversation, take a jot down somewhere and say, my bias are these. List them down and ask yourself, is there passion in, can I invest passion in that bias? Bias is an asset when it comes to issues of injustice. If there is no tug in our heart, there is no possibility of transforming anybody. There is no possibility of addressing issues of social injustice. It will simply become a project. And unfortunately, it will not change anyone's life. One of the things we did in World Vision, we've been asking the National Council of Education and the Education Department to include a chapter on the rights of children in our school textbooks. And as World Vision, we wrote several times to authorities in high places in Delhi, and this lady called Miss Sinha, who was the chair of the National Commission on the Rights of Children in Delhi. We kept telling her, influence National Council of Education and Education Research and Training to include a chapter in the textbooks of children. They refused, or they just basically turned a blind eye. They said, we will do it. So what we did was we got children in many of our projects to send a postcard to Mrs. Sinha, who was the chair at that time of the National Commission on the Rights of Children in Delhi, asking her to include a chapter in our textbooks. And in World Vision, we work with 2.6 million children in our country. And then we got all these children to send postcards to Mrs. Sinha. They say there were about 40 to 45,000 postcards that were sent to the Delhi office demanding that a chapter be included in our textbooks on the rights of children. Mrs. Sinha called her office and said, please ask your children not to send any more postcards. We've got the point. Your bias is an asset, demands hard choices. Those who cannot make hard choices will not make a difference in life. The society will immediately pick us up and say, these are people who are simply drifting through life. No passion, no bias. But leaders with passion and bias will have followers. Wherever you work, whichever place God will place you, people will naturally follow you. And for bias, your location matters. In the Kala Pani movie or video, it was so natural for us, I would think so, that we stand with the girl who was judged by the local panchayat as having stolen. And she kept saying, no, no, you're telling lies. But unfortunately, in our system, we rarely listen to those on the margins. We simply write them off as a statistic, as simply as one who is not compliant with the system determined and designed by those who are in power. And in a very strange situation, in that movie, quite a few of the women have been victims of that Kala Pani mindset. And I ask ourselves, how many Kala Panis are there today? Victims of this bias, victims of this ill treatment, injustice in our nation, about whom you are deeply disturbed. Tomorrow, when you open the newspapers or go to some website and read your news, what tugs your heart? And it is important that you check on where is your location. And your location, if you're on the side of the powerful, naturally nothing will tug your heart. But if you're on the side of the margins, those for whom the society considered as not worth considering, that is a bias you want to nurture, because your bias is an asset. The fourth trait that I want to offer you, in issues of social justice, there is a demand for highest standards of accountability, because we serve a people who rarely have a voice. They're not part of social media. Do not have WhatsApp accounts. They don't have blogs. They don't have Twitter accounts, and they cannot express their voice. These are the powerless. They form a significant majority in our country. While the nation gets busy designing and defining what does privacy mean, those on the margins simply take for granted that they don't have any privacy. And for them, we require to maintain higher standards of accountability. We are dealing with those who do not have a voice. The second aspect of accountability is when you and I, as we go through life, and I want to suggest that you are a privileged people studying in a pretty important colleges that the nation knows of, and I've known your colleges in many surveys across many journals as being one of the more renowned colleges. You need to add value and say, I want to offer this back to the society. For some reason, you are placed at a privileged position. You want to add value to those on the margins who do not have the same privileges that you have had. And you want to ask yourself, this is important. This is about impact. This is about the life of someone in the margins saying, just simply because I have had the privilege of going through college education, Royal College education, and you want to say, how can I impact and offer it back to our society? We need to be able to make sense to the weakest link in our society. When you make sense to the weakest link in the society, you create movements. And I want to suggest to you as young people, don't waste your time in activities and projects. Ask yourself, will this activity and project cause ripples of transformation, or will it just simply die after my academic year is over? The fifth, or the summary of these traits I want to offer you. The first one is learning to lead in chaos, in the midst of chaos. Like I said, ambiguity is by default the context in which leadership flourishes. Second, you need to be able to inspire teams and communities with passion. Third, you need to have a clear bias. Bias is an asset. Don't pride yourself by saying you are neutral. That is okay with the political world, not when you deal with issues of injustice. The fourth trait, you and I are called to redefine returns with the margins in mind. How does it add up to the margins of our society? And the last one that I made brief reference to, you and I are called to be positioned for movements. Don't waste your time with projects. It is important that you ask yourself, will my activity in my college cause people to continue to become part of a movement? Or will this project simply dry up once after I finish my activities in college? Thank you very much, Karthi. Over to you for questions.
Thank you, sir, for enlightening and knowledgeable talk. Now, I would request everyone to put up their queries in the comment box.
So now I'll be reading out the questions from our volunteers.
Okay, Nihal.
So one of the first question is, despite consistent experience of high growth,
India still goes with the lowest indicators of human development. How can we terminate such issues? So I'll repeat the question. Despite consistent experience of high growth, India still goes on with lowest indicators of human development. How can we terminate such issues?
Okay, thanks, Nihal. Let me try answering the questions. When we talk about growth and the metrics often used to measure growth in any nation are metrics that include and reflect the economic activities of those in higher economic levels. GDP is about dealing with economic activities of those in formal sectors and in sectors that matter for nation. Very often informal sectors are left out. So there is a problem with our metrics. The second piece is we used to believe that somehow trickle down will work, but our green revolution hundreds of years ago has proved conclusively there is no way trickle down works in any economic system, especially in an economic system of a society that is highly stratified. Because I just simply happen to be the wrong gender, the wrong caste, the wrong class, the economic wealth of the nation never reaches me. So, what we call today as globalization, market economy, is there is a bias in the system that tends to exclude those on the margins. And unfortunately, when it comes to human development index, the metrics used are metrics that make sense for the people on the margins. Issues of malnutrition, issues, when you look at malnutrition, the issues of stunting, underweight. We have 49% of our children who are malnourished. And as young people, it is important for you to know when we say 49% of our children are malnourished, by the age of 2, half the brain is damaged. That means they join their school. When they join the first standard in the fifth year, their brain is half damaged. And then to expect them to come first in class is a myth. And then ask them to join Jyoti Nivas College, completely not possible. They will always be in the lowest rungs of our society because the brain was damaged when they were 2 years. Significant of number of them don't even see their fifth birthday. And that's why many of our poor families have many children, because the casualties to issues of malnutrition and other issues are significant. To make up for the loss, they have more children. The metrics used for human development index are so different from metrics used for measuring GDP and national growth. Possibly, Nihal, that would be one area. And as young people, you want to ask yourself, which metrics would you go by to measure the development of a nation of 1.39 billion, which has 49% of its children who are malnourished? Thanks, Nihal.
Thank you, sir. So the next question is, when should one take a stand against what he or she believes to be an injustice, and what are the most effective ways to do this? I'll repeat the question. When should one take a stand against what he or she believes to be an injustice, and what are the most effective ways to do this?
There are a few things I think you want to ask yourself. There is really no right time. Like I said, as leaders, young leaders, you need to get familiar with, used to ambiguous situation. Life never comes with one right answer, another wrong answer. It always comes with many grays. Any time is important time for us. As long when it hurts those on the margins, it's a good time for you to intervene, especially on issues of justice when there are emotions involved, because justice is not simply a statistic that has gone wrong. Many years ago, when Mrs. Indira Gandhi was shot down, there were riots in Delhi, there was huge burning of buses and buildings and people killed. India Today had an article about those riots. At the end of that article, the author wrote at the end of the article, or after narrating all the statistics, that is the riots and the burning of buildings, buses, etc., He finally concluded his article by saying, all said and done, statistic never bleeds. It's people who bleed. Poverty and injustice is about people bleeding. And it is important to recognize that social justice is an issue of feelings and bleeding. And how do you respond? It is important as a caution. It'll be important for you to bring a few friends together who have the same passion and the same bias together. Don't go alone. Issues of social justice is not for star shows. It's a collective movement. Even if two, three of you come together, and as young people, you have great asset. You have an asset and access to social media that many of us never had and are just learning what it means. Get used to it, leverage it, communicate it, and it's important for you to provide thought level leadership. Challenge bias, challenge assumptions that have caused injustice in the first place. So, when do you respond? Anytime when you see there is injustice, right time. How do you respond? Always as a group. Never go as an individual. Because the world has a way of marginalizing you when you are an individual. Be very careful. Come together as people who have the same passion and bias, and put up your hand, leverage social media, write about it, because remember, you are accessing WhatsApp and tweets, Twitter and everything else, Facebook, etc., on behalf of those who do not have accounts on WhatsApp, Twitter and everything else. You speak on their behalf. Write about it. In this way, India will wake up and say, wow, our young people are beginning to speak, and they will listen. Hey, thanks, Nihal.
Thank you, sir. So the next question is, what are the benefits and consequences of questioning a social order? So what are the benefits and consequences of questioning social order?
Hey, let me say about consequences first. When you take a stand for issues of social justice, you are on the wrong side of the line. Very simple. And the powers that are will come up against you. You and I have seen this over and over again in our nation, and they will label you as something and marginalize you also. Consequence. Benefits, you will, there is a strange way how the nation warms up to people with passion. When you lead from the front on issues of social justice, they know this person is a person of character, that this person is willing to think beyond her or his own benefits, his own advantages. How will it help me progress my career? You're willing to put others' rights and others' privileges be above your privileges and rights. I remember in Bihar many years ago, we used to have children's clubs and very active children's clubs. And this children's club, really, I recognized that there was this man who was walking around in the village. And one day, 4 or 5 of those girls were missing in the village. The first thing this children's club did was to rush to the police station and say, we saw this man and this is the person who's taken our girls. And before they knew anything, the person was arrested and the girls were released. Simply because young girls stood up to someone who sought to victimize, oppress, and violate the rights of the girls in that village. Is it possible that uneducated young girls can do it? How much more you? Just ask yourself. You have had huge advantages. The benefit, the society gets transformed. The benefit, the next generation will look back and say, we are so glad that there were a bunch of students in Jyoti Nivas and St. Joseph's who stood on behalf of those on the margins. India, for that, because of that, India will become a better place for others. Thanks, Nihal.
Thank you, sir. So the next question is, How to tackle the rigidity of the society when there is so much diversity in opinions and hostility towards positive actions. I'll repeat the question. How to tackle the rigidity of the society when there is so much diversity in opinions and hostility towards positive actions.
A good question. I want to congratulate you on this. When you deal with issues of social injustice, you are precisely up against what you call as the hostility in the society. That is what, in the first place, birthed injustice. It is that hostility which believes that my right is the only right to be considered, it's my way or it's a highway, that you are up against that hostility. And I want to suggest, as young people, when you walk into this, walk with your eyes open and recognize that there will be hostility. And this is why a collective is more important than an individual. Simply numbers, like I said in that postcard movement that we started for the rights of children, 45,000 children wrote to Mrs. Sinha and demanding that a chapter be included. There is power in numbers. Make sure you bring them together. The other name for injustice, using our conversation this evening, is the hostility in the larger society that would like to marginalize the minorities. You remember when COVID happened, the early stages of COVID, our newspapers and our televisions were filled with pictures of migrants. One that caught my attention was a little young child in one railway station who was playing around with his mother who had died. She was covered, her sari had covered her face. Someone very graciously covered her face after she had died. But the child did not know. She was running around the mother, playing with the mother, hoping that the mother will wake up one time, and play with him. Not to be. Why, for 1.3 billion, one more death, so who cares? Not so for the child. For that child, 100% loss. No more mother to go back to. No more mother who will feed her child. And the world, India simply explains it away by saying, we don't have statistics on the number of migrant laborers. Conversation over. Not so for young people. You want to keep these issues in the front burner. India has a short memory on uncomfortable issues like injustice. As young people, keep it in the front burner. And when you deal with issues of injustice, by default, you're dealing with hostile minds. And as young people, you should be the ones who would raise the question. A good place to raise this question, I want to suggest, is tonight's, when you go back home, at your dining table, talk about it. Your dining table is a good place to talk about issues of injustice. That is the beginning of a movement. Just imagine, we have about 106, 116 people on the call. If you have 116 conversations this evening on issues of injustice around your dining table, the birthing of a movement. Thanks, Nihal.
Thank you, sir. So the next question is, what are the causes and consequences of prejudice, and how does an individual's response to it reveal his or her morals, ethics, and values? I'll repeat the question. What are the causes and consequences of prejudice, and how does an individual's response to it reveal his or her morals, ethics, and values?
A brilliant question. Uh, all of us, and I would like to suggest, when we take a position on justice or simply ignore justice, we are expressing our values, morals, beliefs, our character is expressed in your position on issues of injustice. So also those who oppress others do express their morals, values, character. This is not just simply some activities put together or another checklist where you tick off and say, I have been participant in an issue of injustice. All of us bring our ideology to our life, to our conversation. You talk to people with passion within the first 5 minutes, you will know what the person's bias is. That's the quality of passion and bias. And those who oppress also bring their ideology, morals, values, and character. You show me their attitude towards issues of injustice, I will tell you what kind of a character that person is. They will bring up their children in such a way that will be always advantage powerful. But for those of you in Jyoti Nivas and St. Joseph's and who put up your hand to be members of NSS and participate in an afternoon conversation on issues of social justice, not to be, not to be. You have said, I put up my hand so that I will challenge the flawed worldview of those in power. Worldview constitutes morals, values, beliefs, character. That's the purpose of you standing up for issues of injustice. When you stand up for injustice, you're not just simply tinkering with the poor person and wipe the tears of the poor person. You're really challenging those who have caused injustice. Remember that Samar in that video? Very callously, he oppresses the women around him. And then he has a system, panchayat, that backs him up and say, no, you're a woman of moral poor character. Kalapani. They, they do that over and over again. And there are perpetrators of injustice whose values, worldview, character are flawed. And when you stand for injustice, you're transforming them as well. Thanks, Nihal.
Thank you, sir. So the next question is, to what extent does power or the lack of power affect individuals? I'll repeat the question. To what extent does power or the lack of power affect individuals?
Issues of injustice and poverty, or whatever you call it, whatever label you apply, is simply a product of broken relationships. And I want to suggest that at the heart of any injustice is the issue of power relations. One with power, the other without power. We call them powerless in our conversations. So when you take up issues of injustice, you confront issues of power and powerlessness. Very strangely, power cannot flourish when the powerless are united. So what does the power do? To keep the powerless divided. And once they are divided, you can run through. The powerful will always win. Like we said, when you deal with issues of injustice, you're dealing with flawed worldview. When you deal with issues of injustice, you're also dealing with flawed understanding of power. And as young people, I would urge you, don't play the power game according to rules set by the powerful. Challenge the rules itself. Who said? Why should we do it? Challenge flawed assumptions that have created this power infrastructure that keeps the powerless always powerless. Challenge the assumptions. Ask fundamental questions. Who gave this meaning to it? Who ascribed this power to the powerful? Only as young people you can raise the question. Unfortunately, many of us have crossed that finish line where you are called any more young. But I also want to caution you, there is a shelf life for being young. At a certain age, you will also not be considered young. This is the time to stir the pot, to disturb status quo. Keep status quo in a permanent state of flux so that the powerful do not determine the new normal. Ask foundational questions about meaning. Who said power should be this? Who said only the powerful should decide? Who said the children should climb the tree so that they can access the network to participate in an online class? Who said that? Who decided those? Ask those uncomfortable questions. Standing for issues of social justice is the ability to ask uncomfortable questions. Get used to it. Thanks, Nehal.
Thank you, sir. So the last question is, how can literature serve as a vehicle for social change? Repeat the question. How can literature serve as a vehicle for social change?
Hey, uh, my wife and I, in many ways, have been advisors to young people for almost 100 years in our lives. And my wife has been a teacher. There is really no profession other than, you pardon me for using the word profession in relation to this function, other than being parents. The role of the teacher is like the role of God in the life of a teacher, in the life of a student, in the life of a young person. The way teacher demonstrates justice in a classroom is the birthing of right values on issues of social justice. It's born in your classrooms. When your teachers feel comfortable about talking of issues of social injustice, that is the birthing of another transformation in your life. When issues of injustice become not part of the curriculum, we lose it. Unfortunately, most of our education system looks like issues of injustice and social issues are simply a curriculum for the NSS to pursue rather than for the classroom to pursue. A friend of mine used to say, in our education system, A will always have to be for an apple, even if the child has never seen an apple in life. In our education system, they know all the names of the major rivers in the country, the Godavaris and the Kaveris and everything else. But they may never know the name of the river that flows behind their house. Unfortunately, education system is advantage powerful. Legal system, I've heard people say, in the eyes of the law, all of us are equal. But in the eyes of the interpreters of the law, all are not equal. Where do you learn this? In your classroom. Tomorrow, talk to your teacher about where are issues of justice and injustice become part of my class on science or social studies or economics or politics or social work. I had great professors in my class who would disturb our minds. If a teacher doesn't disturb my mind, you have a major problem because you simply slip into becoming another status quo person. As young people, you are designed to disturb status quo. Where is it birthed? In your classroom. Who is the steward and the guardian of that disturbance? Is your teacher. God bless them. Thanks, Nehal.
Thank you, sir. So that's all for the question answer session. Thank you, volunteers. Once again, thank you, sir.
Hey, thanks, Nehal.
Thank you, sir. Please make sure you fill the feedback form once the event is done. Once again, thank you to each and everyone who made time to gather with us today. A special thanks to our speaker and all the volunteers. Thank you. Have a great day.
I'm leaving, Karthikeyan.
Good evening. I am Amira Nasreen from St. Joseph's College, Autonomous. It gives me immense pleasure to propose a vote of thanks for this webinar. Firstly, I would like to thank our keynote speaker, Dr. Jayakumar Christian for giving us amazing insights about the topic and enhancing our knowledge about it. Thank you, sir, for this inspiring speech. I would now like to thank the principal of our college, Father Dr. Victor Lobo SJ, and Sister Elizabeth, CS of Jyoti Nivas College, for giving us their full support in organizing this event. Now, I extend my gratitude to the program officers, Ms. Janvi M., Jyoti Nivas College, and Prasad Sir of St. Joseph's College. My heartily thanks to our NSS team and volunteers of both the colleges for making this a successful event. Hoping all of you have a wonderful evening ahead. Stay safe, stay happy. Thank you.